What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Welcome to episode 25 of the Same Difference podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Kory May. And to my left, I have the good doctor, JD Mass, my tag team partner, which is very important for today, kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
JD
How are
Mass.
you doing, Kory?
Oh, brother, I am so glad to be talking to you. We're going to walk down memory lane together, and we're going to get into some cultural stuff. A little bit of a departure from the serious stuff that we have been talking about, and a little bit into some more fun cultural things.
This is going to be good.
Tell me about what's going on in your neck of the woods down there in Missouri. Excuse me.
Definitely not as exciting as what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Well, you are
because
correct.
in a couple of hours, we are going to both be watching the Caitlin Clark, Angela Reese saga, according to the ESPN. Like, they are pumping up that whole drama as much as they can.
Oh, yeah.
Right now. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. I'm sure by the time people see us, they'll know who the national champion is, but that's okay.
Right. So we'll have an opportunity in upcoming episodes to do some dissection of what we saw, what we heard, what we felt, and we'll be able to talk about that. Before we get into that, though, we've got to give thanks. We always have to give thanks.
Always have to give thanks.
Go ahead.
To our one and only VPR Radio, to Kiana the Goddess and DJ FMI, the hardest working folks in show business and show and love.
We've got great people surrounding us, so they make us great. DJ FMI and Kiana, like the doctor said, I want to thank the Race for What team, because they almost never hear me say thanks, but without an D and Esther, this would be a whole lot more difficult.
Yes.
And on behalf of both of us, thank you to all of our listeners. Tell a friend. Don't forget to download your podcast wherever you get this here. Share it with somebody. Talk about it. Send us an email. We love to hear from you.
Tell your cousin you like and tell your cousin you don't like.
And there we go. We're taking a little bit of break from the stories that we were telling, where JD was in Missouri, in St. Louis.
In Nellyville.
Yes, in Nellyville. And I was in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City. We're going to talk about some cultural things that we grew up on, especially in the entertainment venue.
Yes.
So for me, growing up in Iowa, I didn't get a lot of Black representation. We've talked about this before. So Black movies like Cooley High, they weren't coming to Iowa City. Or Cornbread Earl and Me, that's not coming. Now, we might get Shaft, but then again, I wasn't old enough to see Shaft. And I was able to listen to the soundtrack from Shaft with the iconic Isaac Hayes theme from Shaft. And if you don't know, you better find out, because that is bad. And I mean bad meaning bad, not bad meaning good. Jeez. Now, I'm old enough to understand that bad has always had two meanings: bad qualitatively in the white world, and bad meaning good qualitatively in the black world. I remember when that dichotomy became a thing because I read about it in Jet magazine and in Ebony. And I remember conjugating that in elementary school, bad, badder, baddest. And my teacher got angry and said, this is wrong. And I had to bring in a Jet magazine and or an Ebony magazine and say, how is this wrong? And it was in that moment that, again, awareness starts to develop in terms of there is a black world and a white world. And when I could say something like bad meaning bad meaning good, people got confused.
Right. And you, if I recall, were the black representative of your class,
Yeah,
going back to the House of Representatives and Senate there.
right. So, and this is late 70s, early 80s. There are again black athletes at the University of Iowa, and I'm not having full interaction with him because I'm an elementary school student. So, what do I see? When I watch television, I'm not seeing a whole lot of representation. I'm not seeing things that lift me up. But there is a special place in my life on the weekends where my father and I watch professional wrestling together. And for those of you who roll
Uh,
your eyes, professional wrestling is simply muscular men engaging in a testosterone laced soap opera. That's all it is. You've got good
to
guys.
a young kid, it is entertaining as all get out.
Yes.
I'm not going to let you speak for 30 minutes on this. We are going to go back and forth on this one because
Yes.
I was crushed when I found out that that was not real fighting. But
Oh,
go ahead.
oh, absolutely. When you would see, so let's get some terminologies down pat.
Okay.
Faces are the good guys, heels are the bad guys. And you would always root for the baby faces to
Hmm.
beat the heels.
Okay.
And every week there would always be a cliffhanger so that you would tune in the following week to see what those bad guys did
Hmm.
to our good guys.
So, who are some of the, because you're slightly older than I am, who were some of the good guys, bad guys when you were young, when you were really getting into it?
Okay, we didn't have cable,
Because,
so let's see. Saturday it would be AWA, which would be the American Wrestling
right.
Association,
Yeah.
more or less out of Minnesota, and
Mhm.
then there would be some the competing one was also the NWA, National Wrestling Association,
Yeah.
not the rap group. They would come later.
From which name we will not mention right now.
And let's see, for AWA, we would have Nick Bockwinkel as the heel champion, and he would always cheat. And Bobby Heenan was his manager. You would have from let's see, Vern Gagne was the good guy, and his son Greg, who was a good guy, but he could never fill Vern's shoes. Let's see, the Crusher, Dick the Bruiser. I mean,
Okay.
we're going back old school.
Right.
For NWA, now you might see black wrestlers here. Maybe on television, we might see Bobo Brazil, who the names, Rufus R. Jones, and his cousin. I'm gonna hate to say this, brother, Burrhead Jones. Dude's name was Burrhead. Even as a kid, that was cringe. That was so cringe. And they would announce him as Burrhead Jones. Now, again, I can see the dynamics.
Right.
Rufus and Bobo would almost never, well, no, they never won the championship, even when they had outperformed the white competitors. Never would win a championship. They'd come close. No. Those were some of the cats that we saw. What did you see down in St. Louis?
Well, one, we had what was called wrestling at the Chase Hotel, which is an old school hotel in St. Louis, right across the street from Forest Park. And I didn't realize at the time that the Chase was a hotel until later, but I knew wrestling at the Chase was local, and I believe it was AWA, but it could have been NWA. It was one of those two. Certainly wasn't WW.
Right.
And so when I started to watch, though, WWE was definitely in. I don't know how long it had been going, but yeah, there was definitely. I remember AWA, NWA, and I remember WWE was like the glamorous one on the
Did you
disc.
also get Mid South from Memphis? And was there also NWA from Kansas City as well?
Probably.
Mm.
Might not have been as aware because those didn't those were kind of fading out on television as much when because WWE just started to grow
Oh, yeah.
bigger as the time went on. And so, but my recollection, like my favorite, I still want to go see The Claw right now, the movie that just came out
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
About the Von Erichs. Shondo and my favorite group was the Von Erichs. Like The Claw was the thing. Carrie and David and oh god, why am I blanking?
Fritz was the dad.
Terry.
Yeah.
No, Terry was somebody else. Who who's the dad? Fritz?
Fritz was the dad. There was Carrie. There was David. There was
Something else like Carrie, right? Terry? Mm,
oh,
Lord have mercy. You're gonna make me look it up.
that's okay. That's okay. Remember, they always had the feud with the Freebirds.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there was Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and was it Playboy Buddy Rogers? And they would always have they created the rule that as the as the
Kevin,
Freebirds.
Carrie, and Kevin Von Erich, and were the main three that I knew.
Nice. I remember that. I remember those feuds down in Texas. Hmm. Yeah, I understand. I'm picking up what you're putting down about the now the storyline started to get ridiculous, right?
Of
So
course they did.
well started. So let's between the time that I was watching heavily as a kid and the time you were watching WW, it used to be the
Yeah,
Worldwide
WWF
Wrestling Federation.
Federation. Yeah,
Then it became World Wrestling Federation. Then it
yeah,
became World Wrestling Entertainment,
yeah. So I was WWF. Yeah,
right? And okay, so before Hulk Hogan becomes the big guy over there in WWE or WW,
yeah.
we'd still see you'd start to see him show up out of Minnesota, and I remember seeing Andre the Giant, and
Oh
never
my,
live, but anytime that Andre the Giant would come on television, it was like, oh my gosh, look at the
yeah.
size of that
I
guy.
know. He was amazing. Loved Andre.
And as a kid, you're always looking at the size of this guy and wondering, why isn't he world champion? Because he mops the floor with everybody.
Right.
He should be world champion, not Nick Bockwinkel, not Ric Flair.
Ric Flair. Ric Flair was in one of those, right? He wasn't in the WWF at first, right?
Yeah, not yet. Remember, he was in NWA, which turned
Yeah.
into World Championship Wrestling, and there was Mid South Wrestling
Yeah,
and Georgia
WCW,
Championship
I remember.
Wrestling.
Yeah, all of that. I remember WCW. Wow, I was not expecting this when I woke up this morning, but yes, this is a good memory lane. And of course, my friends and I had to try and seek, like you said, some black wrestlers. So for us, there was Kamala.
Oh yeah,
There was the Junkyard Dog.
JYD, yes sir.
We'll take Jimmy Superfly Snooker. He had a deep enough tan,
Yeah,
and he flew off. I mean, he was cool. He flew off the top rope. There was definitely some good times in that time period. And then of course they had the cartoon that came out and all of that.
Yes. And so let's start looking at some of the stories, right?
Hmm.
You've got, well, in my time, we've got all this Cold War stuff happening. So you've got Sergeant Slaughter, and they had the Bolsheviks, and you had to have Sergeant Slaughter as the real American hero, and then you've also got Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan's taking on the Iron Sheik,
Oh wow, yes. And Rowdy Piper and
right? So you've got this Middle Eastern conflict. You've got the real American patriot fighting against the Iron Sheik who's from Iran, and you've got to you've got to be able to root for the good guy, Hulk Hogan, who tells you to say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and what is it? And pray to the big man above, right? Something like that. And versus the Iron Sheik, who was going to put uh, Hogan in the camel clutch and break his back.
right.
So we're absorbing all of this jingoistic crap, and we're not even aware of it. We're not aware
Yeah.
of the dynamics of it. We're the
No,
guy in the
and
back.
then as kids, we weren't aware. Like my friend tried to put me in the Iron Sheik and pull my chin up as he sat on my back, and my uncle had to get him off me because I was like in so much pain I couldn't believe it. And that is when I started to learn, oh, it's only it's acting. Okay, because that really hurt. I didn't understand how somebody could, how they go under your arm and twist you a
Oh
hundred
yeah.
times and like this doesn't make sense, but my grandfather finally had that talk. But go ahead. Yeah, all of the different inner fightings of it.
You're absolutely correct. If if real people use those moves consistently, you'd jack some folks up.
Up, right.
I didn't believe the figure four leg lock would
Mm,
work
yeah.
until I had a friend put that on me, and
Uh-huh.
I whimpered like a small woodland animal. I was like, all of those things that happen. People can say yes, it's fake. If you don't know how to do it right,
Yeah.
you will hurt yourself
Yeah.
badly.
Absolutely.
I I had much greater respect after I had a friend who did some professional wrestling, um, put me in the holds, and he said, Kory, as soon as you feel any pain, tap out. And he put me in a full Nelson, right? I was like,
Mhm.
Okay, that hurts. Um, uh, this is the crash test dummy stage in life, where you have to find out,
Where
f
your
around and
limits are.
find out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I effed around
Exactly.
a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So you think that, well, you go through this whole idea that this is real when you're a kid, and then there's a point where you realize, well, it's not that real. And
Hmm.
then you try to put and do those moves, and then you find out that these are trained professionals
Right.
doing something that, if I did that on the playground, Mrs. May, come get your son. We're gonna book him. I don't care that he's 11. He's just jacked up six kids.
Exactly.
So
The
I remember.
clothesline. Yeah, all of that.
So now we've got these storylines that are coming up. I mean, Hulk Hogan ended up having to get bigger and bigger and bigger against villains, right?
Right.
So you've got this story escalation happening. Early on, he fights Andre the Giant, early WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And again, for all of our wrestling fans who are encyclopedic on it, I'm just pulling out snippets that I recall.
Right.
Um, One of the big ones was Andre the Giant, because Andre is huge. He's bigger than Hogan, and at that time, if you remember, what was it, Rocky two? No, Rocky three. Uh,
Where Hogan.
yeah, where he goes against Hogan. Hogan is absolutely massive in
Yeah.
that one. Full
Yeah.
steroids. He is jacked. That dude is straight up yoked.
Right.
And that was peak Hogan. Hogan's going up against um Andre the Giant, and Andre is big, just 7 foot 500 pounds. You escalate that up. You've got
Hmm.
another storyline: Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage.
Randy
They were
Savage.
supposed to be friends and the Mega Powers, and Macho Man becomes jealous that
Right.
Elizabeth pays a little bit of attention to Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Big match. Yokozuna. You remember Yokozuna, the giant sumo wrestler,
Right.
symbolizing the great threat from Japan,
Yeah. I mean,
managed by Mr. Fuji.
uh-huh. They had all these different cultural representations
Right.
in there, though. There was,
And the Americans had to win
yeah.
here in the States. And it was
Even,
devastating when
even Rowdy Piper's playing his bagpipe and doing his thing.
right. And what would we see? We'd see guys being held down. And when I say held down, meaning they were not at and they were not able to progress beyond to be viable competitors against Hogan. Because Rick,
Mhm.
at the time, the two baddest men, I'm gonna be up here as champions, were Hogan for
Mhm.
WWE and Flair
Flair.
for WCW.
Right.
Now, Flair and the Horsemen, that's a whole nother story.
Right.
We can, gonna be a night tonight. Um, Hogan is everybody loves Hogan. I mean, all the kids love Hogan, and because he built up the whole Hulkamaniacs thing, brother.
Right. What was your who were your guys that you liked?
Um,
Were you a Hogan?
I was a Hogan guy because that was the story.
Right.
It
Get
wasn't until I got older that I started to pay more attention. Um, and there was some cross pollination between wrestling organizations, right? So
Mhm.
you might see the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, who are
Right.
one of my all-time favorite tag teams
Yes.
in WWE, and then you might see them in WCW. I've always been a Dusty Rhodes fan from WCW. Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, baby. The son of
Yeah.
a plumber, the bull of the woods. That Dusty was a white dude who sounded black. And the
Uh,
reason why he sounded black was because he did, I believe it was either he either took Willie Lanier's shtick, it might have been Thunderbolt Patterson, who was black, or it could have been Big Cat Ernie Ladd. Now, all three of those guys played HBCU football, and after their football careers, after their stints in football, they all jumped into professional wrestling.
wrestling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember when some of the NFL players got into it. What was anyway? I can't remember now the names, but Mark somebody I can't remember his name, Gastineau or something like that.
Oh, yeah, Gastineau did a stint, I think, in some WWE pay-per-view for a minute and
Yeah,
a half. He was in real short.
yeah.
He was in for a cup of coffee. I remember that.
That's when I knew you actually had to have skill and training too, because it wasn't just about being big. You actually had to really get some understanding of these techniques and whatnot.
Oh yeah. And here was the thing: if you had a good booker, a booker is someone who books the matches, and
Mhm.
they could tell a coherent story, people would turn out every every week to see what happens next. And
So
this was back in the day before you had pay-per-views with these giant events. WrestleMania was like the first big event, and then everybody tried to imitate that. And then they got greedy and tried to put on more than they're trying to put on an event every month, right?
right.
That's where we are right now, is trying to put on an event every month.
Yeah. For for me, side note. Adrian Adonis is at wrestling at the Chase. He wins his match. He's walking down back towards the locker room, and somebody in the stands throws a beer on him. He's pissed. He goes running down, chasing this guy into the stands, and throws somebody up against the wall to get them out of the way as he's trying to move. Well, the guy he threw against the wall ends up being a client of my father to sue Adrian Adonis. Mind you, my Shondo and I had to be 10, 11 years old at the time. We are so ecstatic. We want to go get and meet him. I don't know how much we wanted an autograph, but we definitely wanted to meet him. Imagine you're Adrian Adonis and the lawyer who is suing you goes, "Hey, do you mind during the deposition? Do you mind before we start? I just my son and his friend would love to meet you." No, at the time I'm like, boy, he was rude. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
I got to meet him. He definitely was not happy to meet me. Yeah, yeah, kid. Nice to meet you too. Yeah, yeah.
This little what? He wants what?
Exactly.
Beg pardon, you want what? An autograph. So, how did that whole thing turn out?
I, I believe it ended up being a settlement. I can't remember whether the wrestling federation that he was wrestling for at the time got involved and actually paid the settlement through their insurance or whatever, but it was a settlement. It did not go to trial because I would have been my butt up in the courtroom with all of my friends. It would have been packed up in there.
Dad, can we skip school to watch this?
Right. Exactly.
We're here for the
Matter
exquisite
of
legal
fact, I'm,
training.
I'm going in and telling my teachers, can we do a class trip to learn about the court process this week?
That would that would have been hilarious. Uh, Mr. Adonis, these are some of my friends. Might they get autographs too?
Exactly. During the recess. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be right now.
I imagine for those of us who are not big wrestling fans, this may not be funny to you, but to us, this is cracking us up.
Yeah. And
Oh,
Adrian Adonis was kind of a irritating, not super popular wrestler anyway, but he definitely had a name for himself.
oh yeah. And
And
the thing about him was that he was starting to play into the androgynous. He played into the androgynous
yeah, you're gonna have
kind
to
of
use words I understand. I don't watch all of Corey's words of the day.
cross dressing. He
Oh
he
yeah,
did he did some cross dressing, and there was some
yeah,
uncomfortable.
right. I
He
remember
he
that.
he sat in the discomfort of the audiences now. I mean,
Mhm.
then because he would come out with in pink with his
Right.
hair up in
Yeah.
like pigtails, and there might
Yeah.
be mascara and rouge on his
Yeah.
cheeks, and that made people feel really uncomfortable, and it was easy to root against him. There was
Yeah.
also another there was the adorable Street, who was very similar in character, say
Hmm.
similar build, similar gimmick. And as I watched this stuff, um, tapes from this, you can see strains of homophobia
Yeah.
and laced in there.
Right.
And I look back with some age, a little bit of maturity, and go, wow, what were we being what were we being fed such that
Mhm.
I didn't like this guy because he wore pink,
Right.
because he had a very masculine body and acted in feminine ways, or
Hmm.
what ways that we thought were feminine, which
Right.
weren't actually feminine. Wow, man, you're helping me pull stuff way out of the archives. Um,
Yeah.
Here was another guy, handsome Harley Race. Do you remember Harley Race as
That
a
name
villain?
sounds familiar, but I can't remember.
Oh, he had permed hair and he had mutton chops. Pound
Okay.
for pound, dude was tough as nails.
Uh-huh.
He didn't go too much into WWE.
WEF. Yeah.
He was more NWA, if I'm not mistaken, in Mid South. And
Hmm.
I remember even WCW. I remember when uh, this was a landmark moment for me. It's in the early 90s, well, late 80s, early 90s. Ron Simmons, who used to play nose guard at Florida State, doesn't make it in the NFL. And he comes to WCW and talks about how he wants to be like the people's champ. And this is before The Rock jumped in on that. And he starts to wrestle. And he was as explosive a human being as I have ever seen. And the feats of strength that he does are great. Now, Ron Simmons, for those of you who don't know, Ron Simmons is black.
Hmm.
And he goes in a match. They built him up to take on Big Van Vader, who was colossal. He played football at the University of Colorado. He had a red and white singlet. He was a bruiser, and he had this mask. And he would take off this giant mask, and he'd press a button on it, and steam would come out of it. It was Vader was a scary dude.
Right.
Simmons and Vader wrestle for the world championship, and Simmons pins him. And the whole audience goes berserk. It's the first black wrestling champion that they've wrestling world heavyweight champion that the NWA has had. Dudes come out from the back. They're lifting up Ron Simmons. Even Van Vader, who he beat, is like, good job, dog. Good job. And that was that moment where I was like, this might work. Over time, it took a while, but you
Right.
would start to see black champions. Now, I'm not paying short shrift to Junkyard Dog, because Junkyard Dog was the face of Mid South wrestling in Memphis until the money got so good from WWE that he left
Right.
Mid South wrestling in Memphis and headed up to the Northeast under WWF
F.
at the time. Now, let's see more. Here's some more stuff. So, right at the time, so similarly, let's talk about 85, 86 in the Southeast. So, Georgia Championship Wrestling, you've got Ric Flair as the champion, and they start to create this stable. Now, stables had been around for a while, but this just the premier elite stable at the time was the Four Horsemen,
Right.
and the Horsemen all white, and you just got the feeling they didn't like black people. So you had Ric Flair. Now, yeah, you had Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, and who was that fourth one? That fourth one ended up being any number of people. Gosh, maybe that was Barry Windham at the time, and no, Tully Blanchard. There we go. Arn, Tully, Ole, and Ric Flair, and they were managed by J.J. Dillon. And no matter if you were a face and you were going to beat Ric Flair or Tully in a match, you were going to get jumped by the Horsemen to make sure that you couldn't beat their guy. So they would retain their championships all the time. Run in, beat somebody down, get disqualified, keep the championship, because of course you can't lose your title on a disqualification.
Yeah.
You know how frustrating that was to watch as a kid? even as a late teen, early 20-year-old, you're like, man, he had him beat dead to rights.
When did you or do you still follow? Did you do it with your children at all?
My Yeah, I did it with my especially my eldest son, Xavier. We used to watch it together. And it was more about the athleticism of how did they do that,
Right.
and also getting caught up in the storylines, right?
Mhm.
It's easy to watch these storylines and just be caught up with them, like, yeah, look at him do that, the athleticism. I mean, when and you brought in several issues a couple 10 minutes ago about different cultures. Well, it's not only different cultures that are represented as faces and heels, but also different styles of wrestling. Different cultures make different fights, or different styles make different fights.
Mhm.
So, Japan, or Mexico has a very aerial style of wrestling. So you've got little dudes doing flips and very acrobatic
Yeah.
moves. And some of Japan's style is based on that. There's another style called strong style, which is heavy on strikes and dealing out punishment, or what you would think is punishment, right?
Right.
European, a lot of it is technical, very technical. I'm going to put you in a move and I'm going to try to make you submit. It's not a lot of brawling. Now, every culture does have its brawlers, but a lot of cultures have very sophisticated styles of wrestling. And when you start to make it a global organization, styles make fights.
Yeah.
So if you can bring in the Japanese guy who has a very sophisticated striking style of wrestling and make him the red threat, if you will, against our hapless American hero who's whatever. Now you've got a styles fight, and you've also got these undertones that are being pulled. Same thing with Mexico and Canadian style. There's a very distinct technical, and it's kind of a combination of, well, there's some aerial, but there's a lot of technical
Mhm.
wrestling where we're locking up. I'm not looking to beat you down. I'm looking to make you submit. All those styles. Jeez. So now you asked, do I still watch? Sometimes, but I get annoyed by this. I get annoyed by the current velocity of WWE, because they've got a pay-per-view almost every month. And
Right.
in order to make a pay-per-view every month, you have to have styles. I mean, not you have to have stories. And there's not a good enough slow play for some of these to fully develop.
Right.
As a storyteller, I need to be invested. You talked about Angel Reese and LSU versus Iowa and Caitlin Clark. We played that team in the women's championship game almost a year ago.
Right.
There have been stories written about Angel Reese, stories written about Kim Mulkey, the LSU coach. There have been stories written about Caitlin Clark forever, and stories about Kim Mulkey and the Iowa Hawkeye team. Now, with all that in there, we're invested to see what's about to happen tonight. And it's been a slow build.
Right.
Everybody, LSU fans looking and seeing what Iowa's doing, Iowa fans looking and seeing what LSU is doing. And when the NCAA women's bracket came out, we all said, this is going to be one of those games. And lo and behold, it came to pass. So now we have the emotional investment. We wouldn't have nearly as much emotional investment if we played them every other week.
Right. And yeah, for me, I stopped watching in the WWF transition into the WWE. I have never seen The Rock wrestle. I'm sure he's talented because he was definitely popular enough to make it big in the transition into film, but that was kind of, I lost it back then. So now, like these days, when I'm hearing recent passing away of different talent, I remember them as kids
Of
and
course.
whatnot. But yeah.
One of the things that you have missed out on was seeing the development of The Rock and the fact that here you have a multiracial man
Hmm.
who's black and Samoan, Canadian Nova Scotian, well, yeah, Afro Canadian, Samoan, become the most popular, one of the most popular wrestlers in the world, along with Stone Cold Steve Austin, a redneck from and that's his
Right.
words, a redneck from Texas. And then you also had Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who was supposed to be the son of aristocracy in the Northeast.
So Stone Cold Steve Austin, I remember before I kind of got out, he was starting to really come up and get popular.
Oh
But
yeah.
but yeah, that was towards the end of my days of watching.
Oh, I picked it up right from around there, and a lot of it was began to, well, it wasn't on network television. It became a
Right.
cable thing, and
Yeah.
then once it became cable, you had much more latitude with the sorts of things that you could get away with because you couldn't get
Right.
away with some of those things on network TV.
Yeah. For me, I also the fact that I really started looking at I got too caught up in how fake it was instead of, like real fighting. And I was also a boxing fan all my life. And so I really gravitated more and more towards boxing as I got older for me.
We should explore that in another upcoming episode. We really should because I've got some thoughts on that too.
Boxing or just
Boxing.
oh yeah,
Oh, definitely. The pro wrestling promotions ended up creating such a it was easy entertainment, accessible to the public, and it was, again, like I said, a male soap opera, a
right.
testosterone laced male soap opera. You always wanted to be able to root for your guys and root against the other guys.
Yeah,
And so how would they communicate this? Well, you've got the bookers creating these matches, but personalities were the
for
things
sure.
that sold matches.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. It was an extremely colorful, like really participants, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody had an extreme personality. And I think that's what really was part of the I mean, well, obviously that was really that was a Captain Obvious statement right there. But
No,
that was
no.
definitely part of what was the draw was and truthfully, just from a cultural perspective, you don't typically see that level of expression amongst white folks in entertainment as much, right? Like for me growing up, part of what I loved about black culture was the level of expression, right? The
Right.
colorfulness, the outgoingness, the even in the in the stand-up comedy, it was tended to be much more expressive, and white comedy was more headsy, and unless you had like a Robin Williams who was also that. But there was there was not as much of that really full on expressive emotional thing. But in wrestling, these white folks express themselves.
Right, right.
They
You
had
are on it.
personalities like to the nth degree.
Yeah. So the folks that grabbed you, if you couldn't communicate with your audience, the audience, if you couldn't make the audience emote to either love you or hate you, you weren't going to be around long.
Right.
Or you would have a manager who did all the talking for you and you just went out to the ring and beat people down.
Yeah.
So I mean, and these wrestlers would create the catch lines, these catchphrases that whenever they would cut a promo, you would want to say the words alongside them. Like Ric Flair, like it or not, learn to live with it because it's the best thing going today.
Right.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I remember when he created this, um, he's just defeated Jake the Snake Roberts, and he's and Jake, oh, who was one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Love
Yeah,
that guy.
mine too.
Whoo! He comes up and he said, "You can talk about your John 3:16. I'm telling you, Austin 3:16 means I just whooped your ass. And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so." And the audience just went. And about a week later, all of a sudden, these Austin 3:16 shirts came out. And then on the back of it, it was like, because Stone Cold said so. Merchandising, just, they were just printing money. They were
Yeah.
printing money. The Rock says, know your role and shut your mouth. Do you smell what The Rock is cooking? I mean, all these catchphrases help people connect with the audience, sell merchandise, bring more people back in, get eyeballs because you wanted to see what was going to happen next.
And you know what was fascinating was Mean Gene, this little bald, short guy, kind of looks like I do now. And he was so just, I mean, he would speak loudly so that to match some of the level of volume, but he wasn't colorful like that. And that made the rest of the participants so colorful, but they always kept having to come to him to get that point across, to develop the story even further. And so just seeing that dynamic, it was definitely, you're bringing back some memories today, buddy.
Well, Mean Gene was, he was the straight man. I mean, he
Right.
was every guy.
Yeah.
He was the guy that wanted
But
to ask all the tough questions. And
yeah,
Mean Gene was
in
about
his little
yay tall.
tuxedo. Yeah.
And all these brutes just
Yeah.
he's
You
holding that
know, Mean
microphone.
Gene. You know, Mean Gene.
Another guy who had personality. Funny you should say that, because you're bringing this back. Gene Okerlund was the guy that did the interviews, but do you remember Jim Ross? Jim Ross was the dude from Oklahoma. By God, it's a slobber knocker. That Oklahoma accent was
Uh-huh.
so, I mean, when I think about announcers from my childhood, he's one of them. He
Uh-huh.
was one of them, because that Oklahoma accent just grounded it. That this is a guy that would have a beer with you and tell you stories about the things that he's seen on the circuit working all over the world. Good old JR. He's just, that was the sort of thing that, in terms of a storyteller, geez, whomever has dissected this and made it work in whatever federation around the world has all these elements together, and they're telling stories. And no story happens without a baby face, your hero, a villain, your heel, a conflict between the two of them over something that is important between both of them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, McMahon, what is it, Ed McMahon? No, Lord have mercy.
Vince.
Vince McMahon, yeah, Lord have mercy. Vince McMahon, I actually kind of, because I enjoyed the entertainment of it so much, I would listen to him as a, you know, desiring entrepreneur, listen to him speak about growing the business of this whole thing, right? When he took on the XFL initially and did these other ventures to try and spread it, the way he approached it and using these same things, I learned so much about how much went into the behind the scenes of developing all of this storyline, to develop the ratings, to do all of these different things. It was definitely very entertaining and a great time.
It's amazing how something that was in our respective childhoods has stuck with us so well.
Yeah.
And watching your eyes light up as the memories are connecting with you makes me just giddy. I'm laughing my butt off, because it's like, yeah, you get it.
Hmm.
You get it. We may not have seen the exact same matches, but guess what? We had a very common experience.
Yeah.
and rooting for the same guys or rooting for the different guys, whatever. But we were sharing that same experience. So let that be a lesson to you, same difference listeners. This is what happens when we have similar experiences. We can bridge gaps, having conversations.
Absolutely.
Oh, JD, you've been good for my heart today, my friend.
Thank you. You likewise.
Oh,
Needed this type of memory today. That was a
oh,
good one.
absolutely. I invite you, if you have been through, if you have any professional wrestling memories, send them.
Mhm.
We'll read them out. We'll talk about them. We'll share that because, again, this is the way that we knit our stories together. Common experiences that allow us to dialogue. We
Right.
listen, we think, we respond. This is the good stuff. Now, thank you to all of our listeners. You can reach us at samedifference.life.
Yep.
And you may send us an email at samedifferencebroadcast@gmail.com. JD and I will look forward to that. And now, the good doctor gets to send you home.
Thank y'all for coming out. God bless you and good night. We really appreciate it. This was a good break from the norm for us. We hope you enjoyed this one as much as we enjoyed talking about it. And stay tuned. There's definitely more stories, more thought-provoking things than maybe today covered. But we needed this break and we appreciate you being a part of it. Same difference. Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.